Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Reigniting Small Business. I'm Laura Richards from Spark Business Institute, and today we're talking to Patrick Lee, author of The Great Small Business Plateau and How to Blast Past It, available on Amazon. And Patrick's also, of course, CEO of Spark Business Institute.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So, Patrick, several weeks ago on the podcast, we were discussing the inhibitors that oftentimes small businesses and entrepreneurs kind of face as they're moving from a startup enterprise to something greater. And one of these main culprits, I guess, of inhibiting these guys is called the jack of all trades. And we want to go a little deeper into it because it's such a common one, and it's so helpful once it's addressed. So, can you tell us a little bit about jack of all trades?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, I think jack of all trades is a common hiring practice for small businesses, especially in the initial hires. And what it basically entails is this: you're hiring somebody who you can see fitting into a lot of roles. And the reason you're doing that, it makes absolute sense. You don't yet have a large staff. You're not going to compartmentalize folks' functions. You're going to need people who are cross-trained, who can jump in and help out wherever they're needed. So your initial hires, especially your initial hire, but your initial hires will typically be folks who look like they're going to be pretty good at everything, not necessarily an expert in anything, and that you're going to be able to move them around as needed. They can support wherever that is. And what typically happens is that an owner has success with that initially. That makes sense. It works for how you're developing that business. And then they get stuck in that. From that point on, every hire becomes somebody who's not necessarily super skilled or really good at one particular area or particular set of skills. That it's always that there's somebody you could see moving around and being useful in a whole bunch of areas. So, good at everything, master of none sort of situation.
I really identify with that, Patrick, as, when I was running my restaurant business, of course, I took on every role to train other people. But unfortunately, I never fully let control of any of them. So, I was the head cashier and the head burrito roller and the head financial person and the head. And really, I feel like that whole master of nothing when you're master of everything adage really applied to at least me in my experience. What are some of the other experiences you've seen businesses? What does it look like in other businesses?
Well, I think there's generally two sort of outlines of how it ends up looking. One is that everybody has the same skill. So, if you go to like an IT company, right, and the founder of the IT company is somebody who knows IT well. So they open an IT business. Now they're doing IT, and they hire some technicians who know IT. Now, everybody in that business can go and work on a computer. Some at higher skills than others, but we all hired them to be that. It's almost the reverse jack of all trades. They are all knowledgeable in the exact same area, and they're forced to be jack of all trades because there are no experts in any of the other areas. There's no customer service person. There's no, billing person. There's none of that. They're all technical people who are in there, and they're forced to fill all the other roles. So that's one way. The way that's more common, though, is, and it's sort of your example, like, so you go in, you own a business, a restaurant, right? And you start hiring. Well, initially, you're hiring because you're like, okay, this person looks like they have aptitude. Like they're talking to me, they're fairly smart. They look like they can greet customers. I'm sure I could train them how to build the perfect burrito. I don't have any doubts that they're going to give the correct change, right? So you've just hired sort of this basic here. Now, you didn't say, hey, have you worked? I mean, you may have said you work at a restaurant, but you didn't say, how much food prep have you done? You said more like, so you've had experience, right? So what we end up with is a whole bunch of folks who they could sweep the floors for you. They could work a register for you. They could be behind the grill. But at some point, and this is probably one that you kind of want to tell a story. At some point, when you're working with these people, you're going to pick somebody out. You're going to go, wow, you're really good on the grill. I actually like you on the grill. So I'm actually going to make you the grill person. right? So without even recognizing what you've done, you hired a jack of all trades, but then you identified some area that they were good in and you put them there. Now think about this though. Out of all those jack of all trades, they may have been the best on the grill, but of all the folks you could have hired, were they the best on the grill? So if you had hired for a grill master, would you have gotten somebody who was far better than your best jack of all trades on the grill?
That's an excellent point. That's a really excellent point. I like also to look at it, when even looking at the service industries of what things you can outsource that you shouldn't be doing yourself. When I looked at my being a jack of all trades, I needed to outsource some accounting services, right? I didn't need to be doing that myself. And I needed someone who could show me the numbers in a way that they made sense to me so that I could then utilize those in my business better. And I would spend more time looking at numbers if I wasn't getting bad data.
Oh, and not only getting bad data, but approaching the analysis of even good data from a very limited and knowledge dependent method. Like if you have somebody who is a true outsourced CFO or a CFO knowledge-based person, how they can analyze and break down your numbers and your cost and your ratios and your threshold management and all of that is so much more insightful than how even those of us, you and I, who are very used to P&Ls and balance sheets and moving numbers around, but it's not the same thing, right? So that insight of that expertise, it's there for a reason. It can take you places that you're not going to get to on your own recognizance or whatever the right word is there.
Well, and you and I were talking about this earlier, but I think, the numbers are for people who are intimidated by their numbers or overwhelmed by their numbers. It's kind of that, thing that you put to the side that you should look at, but you're not. Mm-hmm. And I would really encourage those folks to, if you're going to look for expertise in an area, that's probably the most important area to do, because you can make substantial changes, as we were discussing, whether it's measuring something, finding out that something's off in your metric, and in my business, my business biggest expenses were labor and food. So looking at those categories and drilling down, if the price of avocados had gone up and my produce cost was high, what can I do to manage that? Or, if people are putting too much cheese on a burrito, what can I do to manage it? And it sounds, nitpicky, but a few percentages here and there, you're talking about, 2% of $1 million restaurant is $20,000 a year you can save just by making sure people aren't using, an extra ounce in the burrito. And
what you just said, it's such an actionable thing. Like it's very specific. Okay. We've discovered that, we have the right amount of lettuce to make these many dishes over time, the right amount of tortillas, the right amount of seasoning, but we're always 22% short on our cheese. Okay, well, guess what? That's such a direct trainable thing. Hey, folks, we are running out at this point, and there's a reason. So you call it, who's the heavy hander with the cheese on the burritos? I want them making my burrito when I buy, but you as the business owner probably don't want them making the majority of the burritos, right? It's the old adage, what you measure, you treasure. And you're not measuring it. Obviously that could be a hole where you could recoup that money. And I love looking at it in those concrete terms, because what could you do with $20,000? Like, you're like, what? $20,000 in extra cheese? Like, if I could get that money back, that would be awesome. And there's something like that, I believe, in every business. Oh, no, there is. And so to the point you had said, about how the money is the place to go, I would say that when you don't know the place to go, the money's the place to go, because the money will help you find the place to go. But it's not always the one in each business that needs to be addressed. But if you don't know which it is, it'll help find it. So it's interesting that way. But this is sort of a reverse engineering of jack of all trades, because this shows you why the expertise is something that you should go find. But when you're actually looking at implementation within a business, remember, some of these things are outsourceable, and numbers is an outsourceable one, right? You can have a CPA, you can have an outsourced CFO, you can have a bookkeeper, you can have numbers people that come in, give you the expertise, let you do what you need to do, and then go away. That, by the way, is outsourcing to fill some of these high knowledge opportunities in your business is a good way to approach it, without question. But the hiring is super important, because the people who are there on a daily basis, who are understanding holistically what's going on, but then bringing their expertise straight to the issues of that business, that can be hard for outsourced people to be on limited knowledge, limited exposure, and limited time. When there's somebody in your business working in your business, they can see where things tie in, and that expertise is very useful at that point, especially diagnostically, because those of us who have hired all these jack of all trades, we're the smartest person in the room. It's all on us to solve everything, right? It's our limitations that limit our ability to see and diagnose what's going on.
Talk a little bit more about that. I think that's a really key point that should be elaborated upon, about being the smartest person in the room. Can you give us some context around that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times with this whole jack of all trades phenomenon, the reason it happens is the reason I initially stated, right? That we were very successful in the beginnings of the business, having support people come in who could be cross-trained and moved around a lot and all. But just by the nature of that, they're not experts in anything. They're support folks, right? And I think owners tend to, especially entrepreneurs and startups and small businesses, they tend to be very self-reliant, and they tend to put everything on themselves. And in fact, they're very reluctant. They're not yet at a point where they're going to give up authority to anybody. They may give up responsibility to somebody, but they're not going to give that person the authority to carry out their responsibility. They're going to want that person to be responsible for that issue, but they're always going to come to that owner to ask for permission to do something. That level of control breeds a jack of all trades mentality too, because I'm not going to acknowledge or even ask in expertise that's beyond what I know, because it's threatening to me on some level, right? Because they're going to challenge me and all. And I just want to do things the way I want to do things. And I don't really want to be challenged. And I don't want people bringing things to me that I don't understand, because I need to be able to make decisions and analyze things at my level of knowledge very quickly, because I am ultimately responsible for everything. Well, if you think about that, that may make folks comfortable, but it is just by definition a severe limiter on what can be done with a business. Like, what is the limitations, the blind spots of that owner? And if they had somebody with appropriate expertise in different areas, how much efficiency could be built into that business? How many new opportunities could be there that that owner cannot see? If you're always the smartest person in the room, you are completely limited by what you know. And that's why more people being brought in, or that's what brainstorming is. That's why teams of executives come together. You need expertise in a lot of different areas to apply that expertise and collaborate. It can't always be what I think at that moment is the way to go.
And that brings up another diagram in my mind from a time where you have presented this information. And what the diagram basically illustrates is how the capacity of the business is enhanced by bringing on skilled people versus just people.
Yeah. And so here's what it sort of looks like, and I'll try to do it with my hands. Okay. It looks like this is the level of capacity right here that the business has, with the owner being the smartest person in the room, right? And how the owner will try to expand the capacity of the business is they'll hire somebody down here. They'll hire somebody right here as a sort of a little pillar, and that person will be a support person, right? So they'll be there to help in some way. They may do some bookkeeping. They may do some data entry. They may do some things that the owner says, hey, if I had somebody help me do this, it gives me more time so I can be more productive. And we hear that all the time, right? So that little support thing pushes up the capacity of the business a little bit, just a little bit. But ultimately, we hire a bunch of those little pillars, okay? And this doesn't move very much. And the reason is because they're under there supporting that this is the level of knowledge and expertise right here that the owner has. And we can just kind of push it a little with those support folks, but it's not pushing it up. Now, let's just say that over here, we go out and we hire an expert. Okay, we hire somebody who knows far more than the owner, who is truly an expert in their area. And to your example, we'll say we hire an outsourced CFO. Well, now that pillar looks like this. So now, all of a sudden, we have increased the capacity of the business dramatically, right? This pillar is now pushing the owner's knowledge way up here, right? And so it's not this thing. It's now this, and all that's under here is the new capacity. And you keep adding those pillars. So pretty soon this thing starts going like this, and it starts going higher. And this is where owners get scared then, because they're like, okay, so I've hired an expert in every area who's smarter than me. What's my role? Well, your role is the owner. By definition, these are all experts in silos. And you are the person who's the umbrella. You're the one who connects it all. You see the vision for the business. You understand where this is going. You have the dream. You've got it all connected. They're just bringing specific silo expertise to that vision. So you're always making sure that this is connecting and that we're going in the right direction. That's what the owner's ultimate true role should be. It shouldn't be operational. It shouldn't be the smartest guy in the room. It should be the vision.
Very, very well said. I love that part of the presentation, because I think it clicks with so many people when they see visually, right, okay, if I got the smartest marketing person and I got the smartest financial person and I got that, you can understand immediately what a capacity generating thing that would be.
And it's always fear that stops them. It's the two things. It's fear of this is different than the way we did it. We did it with jack of all trades, and how would I do that, right? There's that fear. And then there's fear that, wait a minute, what's my role now, right? What do I do if everybody in the room's smarter than me? Well, they may be smarter than you in certain areas. It doesn't make you less intelligent or less the business owner, right? That's what you do. I think that, another piece of this that gets interesting for owners is, how do I do this though? Like, if I'm going to go hire somebody, they're going to cost more, right? And when I bring them in, how's my business afford that? And how does this work? And so I always say, look, you probably want to start in an area that by hiring somebody who's an expert, right? That in that area, it's immediately going to show dividends to the business, because down the road, you want to hire more than one expert. So if you hire somebody who's an expert and they're just a cost, right? They're not generating any more business and they're not making you any more efficient. They're just providing you with capacity, but you still got to fill that capacity somehow. Well, guess what? That's an expensive way to go. So I always say, okay, well, look at your business. A lot of people start with, let's hire an expert salesperson or an expert business development person, right? Because that automatically, theoretically, brings in revenue. But I'll tell you this, there's also the efficiency side. Let's hire somebody in a position, maybe it's IT, maybe it's finance, who's going to look at the business and work on it in a way that your efficiencies start improving. So you're making up their cost on the profit side, not necessarily on the revenue side. Either of those is generating more for the business right out of the gate, so that the owner can feel, wow, I see how that worked. And it will lead to future hires of the same type. I'm not saying silo, but this, the expertise type.
Gotcha. Yes, I see what you're saying. And having been there and done that, if you're going to grow, you sometimes have to step out of the way.
Yeah. And I'll give an example of this whole jack of all trades thing from a reverse perspective. Let's look at it from an industry perspective. So my background, I had a lot of businesses, and I did a lot of work in the veterinary industry. And when I was coming up in the veterinary industry, it was in the late 1980s and the 1990s. Okay, and at that time, pets were just starting to become members of the family, where people would truly spend the kind of money they spend on pets that they do now. And so the veterinary industry was staffed in a way that bred a whole bunch of jack of all trades behaviors. Veterinarians would go off, get their doctor degree, right? Their VMD or DVM, and they would come back and they had been trained to be a veterinarian, to treat animals. They didn't, the veterinary practices didn't generate the kind of revenue and wealth that would allow them to hire folks at high levels. So the way a staff usually worked was the veterinarian who was never trained on business or any of that had to be the veterinarian, the business owner, the marketer, all of that, right? Also had to run the office generally because they weren't hiring, the admin, office manager, support type generally. Sometimes they would, but also the folks that were supporting the assistants, these were generally minimum wage, young women who with not a lot of education, who loved pets, right? And you would go to the veterinary hospitals and almost all the technicians were women, they were young, and they weren't trained. They weren't certified, they weren't registered, they had never gone to school, they just needed a job. And so the veterinarian ended up also being the main support staff on the medical side, the technician, et cetera. These folks were just there to lend a hand or hold an animal or take these drugs out to the waiting room and give them to, the owner or that sort of thing. They weren't super involved in the actual treatment or the business. Well, as pets became members of the family and tons of money was spent in that industry, all of a sudden there started being a whole lot of expertise. You started seeing specialty hospitals open up where the veterinarians working there were board certified surgeons and internists and all of those type of things, which hadn't existed at that much of a level prior, right? And then that meant that the folks that were supporting that needed to be certified technicians, right? These are people who were going to school, almost a nursing degree in the veterinary side, right? And then you had folks who became experts on the business side of veterinary hospitals and centers and so on. And now we were asking for folks who had business degrees to come in and run some of these places. And the industry just expanded, and the need for expertise in various silos began to be evident and in demand. And all of a sudden there were careers in the veterinary industry that were well-paid careers that you didn't have to be a veterinarian to be in that. Now reverse engineer that. You see how as the industry grew, those things were necessary. Well, guess what? It's also necessary the other way. You can help grow your business, your industry, the capacity required by beginning to bring in that expertise, by beginning to offer things at levels that people recognize as a higher level. They'll pay more. There's more opportunity. There's additional services that can be offered, et cetera. So that whole expertise piece, move away from, that very basic hands-on, don't know anything, but I'm here to help mentality, and it expands everything.
That's a good example. I mean, to see it in a whole industry and not just in a single business is pretty remarkable too.
And it's interesting to watch how it even came, because now you can get educated in all those positions. When I started doing it, I just had an aptitude, right? There wasn't anywhere to go get trained. Nobody expected me to do it, and so I just learned it all. And it was interesting to sort of watch as all of a sudden the industry went, we can't just have people learn this by osmosis. I think we need to start training them. We need to have that. We want that expertise now. How are we going to make those folks available to us?
That's right. Pets are people too.
Yes.
Well, I think that has been a pretty thorough overview of the Jack of all trades. I hope everybody out there listening to SBI's Reigniting Small Business podcast today got a lot out of it. And if you want to tune in and hear about more inhibitors, keep an eye out for future podcasts, because we're sure to do that as well.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for being here.